Today, we're diving into one of the most powerful and honestly tragic ironies in modern history. We're talking about the partition of India, but we're going to look at it through a really unique lens. The story of a nation's shield, a shield that protected it for centuries, only to be shattered at its moment of greatest change.
And that brings us to this one central question that just hangs over everything. What happens when the very people and the very land that acted as your shield for thousands of years are sacrificed just to draw a new border? Well, that's the story of India's Northwest.
So, to really feel the weight of this sacrifice, we have to go back in time. We need to understand the geography of the subcontinent and figure out what exactly was this historical shield we're talking about. Okay, so for millennia, history pretty much flowed into India from one main direction. You see, the Hindu Kush mountains, with passes like the famous Khyber Pass, acted like a giant funnel. This made the lands of the Northwest the subcontinent's permanent front line. And these are the specific places that made up that shield. We're talking about the historic, undivided Punjab, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh, and even parts of what are now Haryana and Rajasthan. These weren't just random places on a map. No, they were the first line of defense, the wall that stood between India and wave after wave of invaders. So let's talk about what it actually meant to spend centuries on that front line. This wasn't just a brief conflict here and there. This was a constant state of being for generation after generation. I mean, look at this timeline. You've got the ancient Greeks, the Hunas, the Turks, the Mughals. Every single major invasion had to come through this region first. It was just a relentless, endless procession of conflict, and the people of the Northwest bore the brunt of it all. As a result, places like the plains of Punjab basically became history's favorite battleground. The fate of India was decided there again and again. You know, living through that kind of constant war, it forges a unique kind of culture, a society built on resistance, resilience, and a really deep-seated warrior spirit. And this brings us to the defenders themselves. We're talking about legendary groups like the Rajput dynasties, the incredibly powerful Sikh missiles, the formidable armies of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, and countless local chieftains. For centuries, these were the people who fought, who bled, and who died to stop or at least weaken invaders, all to protect the heartland of India. But after all those centuries of sacrifice, history took a really sharp, almost cruel turn. And this is where we get to the great and tragic irony at the very heart of this entire story. Right here, the whole paradox is just laid bare. On one side, you have centuries of defending India, and on the other, the fate of that exact same shield, to be violently split right down the middle by a line on a map. The protector itself was broken. And the year it all went down, 1947. In what feels like a single moment, a shield that had held strong for millennia was shattered, and not by a foreign invader, but by an act of political division. Now, this wasn't just some abstract political event. For the people who actually lived there, it was an unimaginable human catastrophe. Let's dig into the real personal cost of partition for the people of the shield. This one phrase just captures the feeling perfectly: betrayal by geography. Can you imagine? The very land that you and your ancestors defended for generations suddenly turns against you. Your home, your history, your identity, all of it just becomes a casualty of a new border. You can really break down the suffering into three core traumas. First, there's this profound loss of cultural and spiritual heritage. Second, the absolutely brutal violence and forced displacement. And third, a crisis of identity that still echoes to this very day. I mean, just try to imagine being a Sikh and having to leave behind Nankana Sahib, the birthplace of your faith's founder, Guru Nanak, or being a Hindu, forced to abandon ancient temples that your family has prayed in for centuries. This was a spiritual severing of the deepest, most painful kind. And then came the journey itself. Millions of Hindus and Sikhs forced to flee east, millions of Muslims forced to flee west. And this wasn't some peaceful, organized migration, no. It was an exodus filled with horrific violence, where people lost absolutely everything: their homes, their land, and so tragically, their loved ones. That new border became a permanent scar. For generations, their entire world revolved around cities like Lahore and Karachi. Then, literally overnight, these ancestral homes are in a foreign country, a place they can't reach. It created this profound sense of loss and identity that's forever tied to a place you can no longer call home. But the story doesn't end in tragedy. It can't, because from the ashes of all this suffering rose a legacy of incredible strength, a legacy that was truly forged in fire. Arriving in India as refugees with absolutely nothing, this community didn't just rebuild their own lives, they helped build modern India. You can see their journey back in 3 key steps. They drove an economic revival, they created vibrant centers of commerce, and they massively enriched the nation's culture. Let's be specific about their impact. These refugees were absolutely instrumental in the success of the Green Revolution, helping ensure India's food security. They built new hubs of trade and business in cities like Delhi, and they infused modern Indian culture with their energy, their food, their music, and their completely unbreakable, indomitable spirit. Which leaves us with a final, really powerful question to think about. The people of the Shield sacrificed everything, first in defense of India, and then as a result of its division. So how does a culture, how does a nation truly honor a legacy that is built on both centuries of sacrifice and the ultimate act of severance?